The haunting melody drifted through the saloon's open window, like a ghost seeking refuge from the unforgiving Oklahoma Territory night. Ethan Quinn paused mid-step on the boardwalk, his hand instinctively resting on his holstered Colt as the sweet, sorrowful notes of a lullaby stopped him in his tracks. It was 1885, and in Enid, Oklahoma, such tender sounds were as rare as rainfall in August. Drawn by curiosity, Ethan approached the window, his spurs falling silent as he moved with the practiced stealth of a man who'd spent years tracking both men and beasts across the frontier. Inside, illuminated by the soft glow of oil lamps, sat a woman with copper-colored hair tumbling down her back, rocking gently in a chair as she sang. Her voice carried pain and love in equal measure, yet Ethan noted with puzzlement that her arms were empty, no child nestled against her breast, no infant to soothe with her gentle melody. The song spoke of angels watching over sleep and promises of safety that Ethan knew the West rarely kept. He removed his hat, holding it against his chest out of instinct-born respect for something that felt sacred, even if he couldn't understand why. Olivia Lawson felt eyes upon her before she saw the shadow fall across the wooden floor. Her voice faltered only slightly as she turned toward the window, her green eyes meeting the stranger's weathered face. She didn't stop singing, didn't acknowledge him beyond that fleeting glance, but continued her lullaby to the empty room as tears traced silent paths down her cheeks. Ethan knew he should move on. A man's business was his own in these parts, and a woman's grief equally private. But something in her song held him like a physical force, perhaps, because it had been so long since he'd heard anything beautiful in a land that offered only harsh survival. So he leaned against the wall outside, letting the brim of his hat shield his eyes from the setting sun, and simply listened. Inside, Olivia sang the final notes of the lullaby, her voice breaking on the last promise of morning light. When silence finally fell, she wiped her tears with trembling hands and stood, smoothing down her simple blue dress. Only then did she approach the window, her movements hesitant. "You didn't have to stop on my account, madam," Ethan said, his voice low and gentle as he straightened his posture. "I wasn't singing for an audience, mister." She left the question hanging in the air between them. "Quinn, Ethan Quinn." He placed his hat back on his head with a slight nod. "And I wasn't aiming to be an audience, just happened to be passing by." "Well, Mr. Quinn, now you've passed by. Good evening." She moved to close the shutters, but Ethan caught a glimpse of something fragile in her eyes that made him speak again. "Sometimes a song needs to be sung whether there's anyone to hear it or not," he said. "Especially out here where the wind tends to steal words away." Olivia's hand paused on the shutter. "You sound like a man who understands loss, Mr. Quinn." "I reckon most folks who have survived out here do." She studied him for a long moment. In the fading light, she could make out the lines around his eyes not just from squinting against the sun but from smiling too, though it looked like that hadn't happened in some time. His dark beard was neatly trimmed, unusual for the drifters who typically passed through Enid. His clothes were dusty but not ragged, and while he wore a gun, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who didn't need to prove anything. "I'm Olivia Lawson," she finally offered, "and you're right about the wind out here. It takes more than it gives." "Pleasure to make your acquaintance, Miss Lawson," Ethan replied, tipping his hat slightly. "I didn't mean to disturb your evening." "You didn't disturb anything, Mr. Quinn, just caught me in a private moment." She glanced back into the empty room behind her. "I was just remembering." Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Some memories need singing to be kept alive. A flicker of surprise crossed Olivia's face at his perception. "Yes, they do." She hesitated, then added, Are you passing through or staying in Enid for a while? Haven't decided yet. Came looking for work. Heard the Sanford Ranch might be hiring hands for the drive north. They are. Mr. Sanford was in here just yesterday talking about being short-handed. He lost 3 men to gold fever last month. She gestured to the building around her. This is my boarding house. If you need a place to stay, I have a room available. Ethan considered the offer. He'd planned to sleep under the stars as he often did, saving what little money he had. But something about Olivia Lawson made him want to stay within the orbit of her sorrow and strength. What's your rate, Miss Lawson? $2 a week includes breakfast and supper. She added with a hint of pride, you won't find cleaner beds in all of Oklahoma Territory. That's fair. I accept your offer. Ethan extended his hand through the window. Olivia hesitated before taking it, her fingers cool against his sun-warmed skin. The contact lasted only a moment, but it sent an unexpected current through him, a reminder of how long it had been since he'd touched another person with any gentleness. Come around to the front door, Mr. Quinn. I'll show you to your room. Ethan retrieved his horse from the hitching post and led the animal around to the front of the boarding house. It was a well-maintained 2-story structure, with a wide porch and fresh white paint, a sign of prosperity and permanence unusual for the frontier towns he'd drifted through. Olivia met him at the door, composed now, no trace of tears on her face. You can stable your horse out back. There's fresh hay and water. After tending to his horse, Ethan followed Olivia inside. The interior was as well kept as the exterior, with polished wooden floors and simple but quality furnishings. A small parlor to the right held a piano, another sign that this wasn't just any frontier establishment. You play? He asked, nodding toward the instrument. I do. It was my mother's. Her voice held a note of finality that discouraged further questions on the subject. She led him upstairs to a corner room with windows facing both the main street and the plains beyond. It contained a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a white porcelain basin, and a small writing desk. Supper's at 6, Olivia informed him, handing over a key. Breakfast at sunrise. There's a washroom at the end of the hall if you want to clean up before eating. Thank you, Miss Lawson. Ethan set his saddlebags on the bed. This is more than suitable. She lingered in the doorway, her hands clasped before her. Mr. Quinn, about what you witnessed earlier. No explanations needed, madam. We're all entitled to our private sorrows. Relief softened her features. Not everyone in Enid shares your discretion. I appreciate it. She straightened her shoulders. Well, I'll leave you to settle in. After she departed, Ethan moved to the window and gazed out at the town. Enid was growing, like many settlements in the territory. The railroad had arrived 2 years prior, bringing with it commerce, opportunity, and an influx of people seeking their fortunes. Some would find what they were looking for. Most wouldn't. That was the way of the frontier. It promised everything and guaranteed nothing. He'd been drifting since the war, taking work where he could find it: ranch hand, scout, occasional lawman when a town was desperate enough to hire a stranger with a fast gun. Nothing held him in one place for long. He wondered what Olivia Lawson's story was, what ghosts she sang to when she thought no one was listening. The supper bell rang promptly at 6. Ethan had bathed and changed into his cleanest shirt, aware that he would be dining in mixed company. He descended the stairs to find 4 other boarders already seated at the long oak table. 2 older gentlemen who appeared to be traveling salesmen nodded in greeting. A young couple introduced themselves as the Mitchells. Samuel was the new schoolteacher, and his wife Emma was expecting their first child in the spring. Olivia emerged from the kitchen carrying a steaming pot of stew. Her hair was pinned up now, and she wore a crisp apron over her dress. "Please be seated, Mr. Quinn. Everyone, this is our newest guest." Ethan nodded to the assembled company. "Ethan Quinn, pleased to make your acquaintances." "Mr. Quinn is looking for work at the Sanford Ranch," Olivia explained as she ladled stew into bowls. "Good luck with old Sanford," one of the salesmen said with a chuckle. "Toughest cattleman in the territory, but fair if you work hard." "That's all any man can ask for," Ethan replied. The conversation flowed easily around the table. Ethan learned that the salesmen, Johnson and Peters, traveled throughout the territory selling farm equipment. The young couple had arrived from Pennsylvania just a month earlier, full of enthusiasm for bringing education to the frontier. Throughout the meal, Ethan found his gaze repeatedly drawn to Olivia. She was efficient in her movements, attentive to her guests' needs, but there was a reserve about her as if part of her existed somewhere else entirely. When she smiled, it rarely reached her eyes. After the apple pie had been served and enjoyed, the other guests dispersed to their rooms or evening activities. Ethan remained at the table, offering to help with the dishes. "That's not necessary, Mr. Quinn," Olivia said, gathering plates. "My mother raised me to help when help's needed," he countered, already stacking cups. "And it looks to me like you run this place single-handedly." She relented with a small nod. "I do have a girl who comes in 3 days a week to help with laundry and cleaning, but evenings are my responsibility." In the kitchen, they fell into a comfortable rhythm, Olivia washing, Ethan drying. The domesticity of the task was foreign to him after so many years of solitary existence, yet it felt strangely right. "You've had this boarding house long?" he asked, breaking the companionable silence. 3 years. She handed him a dripping plate. "After my husband died, I needed a way to support myself." "I'm sorry for your loss," Ethan said, the words inadequate but sincere. "Thank you." Her hands continued their work methodically. Robert was a good man. He had dreams of building something lasting here in Enid. This place was his idea, though he didn't live to see it completed. "You've done him proud. It's a fine establishment." A genuine smile touched her lips for the first time. "I like to think so." "If you don't mind my asking, what happened to him?" Olivia's hand stilled in the soapy water. "Fever. It swept through town the first winter after we arrived, took Robert and—" She swallowed hard. "And our son, James, he was only 8 months old." Understanding dawned on Ethan like a physical weight. The lullaby, the empty arms, the private ritual of remembering. "I'm sorry," he said again, wishing he had better words to offer. "It was 3 years ago yesterday," Olivia continued, resuming her washing. "Some days I think I've made my peace with it, other days." She shrugged, letting the unfinished thought hang between them. "Grief doesn't follow any man's timeline," Ethan said quietly. "It comes and goes like weather." Olivia looked at him with curious eyes. "You speak as if from experience, Mr. Quinn." "Ethan, please." He carefully dried a delicate teacup before placing it on the shelf. "And yes, I've had my share of storms to weather." "The war," she guessed. He nodded. "And after. Lost my wife and daughter to raiders while I was fighting. Came home to Tennessee to find nothing left but ashes and graves." Olivia's expression softened with compassion. "So you understand about singing to ghosts?" "I do. Though I can't carry a tune in a bucket, so my ghosts have to make do with one-sided conversations under the stars." He attempted a smile that didn't quite succeed. They finished the dishes in silence, but it was a different quality of silence now, one built on shared understanding rather than polite distance. As they completed the task, Olivia untied her apron and hung it on a peg by the door. "Thank you for your help, Ethan. It was nice not to be alone with the evening chores." "My pleasure, Miss Lawson." Olivia, she corrected. If I'm to call you Ethan, it's only fair. Olivia, he repeated, liking the way her name felt. Thank you for the meal and the company. I'll be heading out at first light to see about that ranch job. I'll make sure breakfast is ready early. She walked him to the kitchen door. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Olivia. As he climbed the stairs to his room, Ethan realized this was the first time in years he'd shared anything of his past with another person. Something about Olivia Lawson had lowered his carefully constructed defenses. Perhaps it was the recognition of a kindred spirit, someone else who carried invisible wounds while continuing to move forward. He fell asleep that night to the memory of her voice singing that haunting lullaby. And for once, his dreams were not plagued by the usual nightmares of war and loss. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and bacon drifting up the stairs. Ethan dressed quickly, strapping on his gun belt out of habit rather than any expected need for it. When he descended to the dining room, he found Olivia already bustling about, setting places for her guests. Good morning, she greeted him with a smile that seemed less burdened than the evening before. Coffee's hot if you'd like to pour yourself a cup. Much obliged. He filled a mug and inhaled the rich aroma appreciatively. Been a while since I've had proper coffee instead of the cowboy kind. I imagine so. You've been on the trail long, coming up on 6 months this stretch. He took a sip, savoring the flavor. Was working cattle in the panhandle before that. She set a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits before him. The Sanford place is about 5 miles east of town. Follow the creek and you can't miss it. If Jacob Sanford isn't there, his foreman marshal will be. I appreciate the direction. Ethan broke open a biscuit, steam rising from its center. These are fine biscuits, Olivia. Remind me of my mother's. A pleased flush colored her cheeks. High praise indeed. Most men wouldn't notice the difference between a good biscuit and a bad one as long as there was gravy on top. My time on the trail has taught me to appreciate good cooking when I encounter it. The other boarders began filtering in, and their conversation turned to general topics. After breakfast, Ethan prepared to leave, saddling his horse in the small stable behind the boarding house. Olivia approached as he was checking the cinch. I packed you some biscuits for your ride. She handed him a small cloth bundle. And there's an apple for your horse. The gesture touched him more than he wanted to admit. That's mighty kind of you. It's what I do for all my guests, she said, though something in her eyes suggested otherwise. Well, I hope to be back this evening with news of employment, Ethan said, mounting his horse. If not, I'll at least be back for my belongings. Either way, there'll be supper waiting. She stepped back from the horse. Good luck, Ethan. He tipped his hat to her and rode out, feeling her eyes on his back as he headed east toward the Sanford ranch. The ride gave him time to think about Olivia Lawson and the strange connection he felt to her. It wasn't just her beauty, though she possessed that in abundance. It was her resilience, the way she had rebuilt her life after devastating loss, the dignity with which she carried her grief. In his years of wandering, Ethan had met many women, but few had affected him the way she had in just one evening of conversation. The Sanford Ranch came into view by mid-morning, a sprawling operation with well-maintained buildings and vast pastures filled with prime cattle. Ethan approached the main house, where a grizzled man in his 60s sat on the porch whittling a piece of wood. You'd be Jacob Sanford? Ethan asked, dismounting. The man squinted up at him. 40 years now, who's asking? Ethan Quinn. Heard you might be looking for hands for an upcoming drive. Sanford studied him with shrewd eyes. You got experience. 5 years with the Bar T in Texas, 2 with the Rocking M in Colorado, and various outfits in between. Can ride anything with 4 legs, rope a steer in any weather, and I don't cause trouble. The rancher nodded slowly. References. Can give you names if needed, but they're scattered across 3 territories." Sanford chuckled. "That's the way of it out here, ain't it? Well, Quinn, I need men who know cattle and can handle themselves when things get rough. Drive to Kansas starts in 3 weeks. Pays $40 a month plus found." "Fair enough," Ethan agreed. "Can you start tomorrow? Got 500 head needs moving to the north pasture today." "I can start right now if you need." This seemed to please the rancher. "Good man. Marshall's out by the corral. Tell him I hired you and to put you to work." By sundown, Ethan had proven his worth to the skeptical foreman and earned the cautious respect of the other hands. The work was hard but familiar, the kind of labor that exhausted the body but cleared the mind. When he rode back into Enid, covered in dust but with the satisfaction of secured employment, the lights of Olivia's boarding house seemed especially welcoming. He stabled his horse and entered through the kitchen door as he had the night before. Olivia was there, stirring something that smelled delicious on the stove. She turned at his entrance, her face lighting up with a smile that made his heart skip. "You got the job," she said, reading his expression. "I did, starting wage and a promise of more if I prove myself on the drive." "Congratulations. That calls for celebration." She reached into a cupboard and produced a bottle of whiskey. "I don't normally serve spirits with meals, but exceptions can be made." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Proper boarding house proprietresses don't usually keep whiskey in their kitchens." A mischievous glint appeared in her eye. "Who says I'm proper all the time? Sometimes rules need bending." She poured a small measure into a glass and handed it to him. "To new beginnings." He accepted the glass, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "To new beginnings," he echoed, taking a sip. The whiskey was good, better than what was served in most saloons. "You should wash up before supper," she suggested. "The others will be down soon." "Yes, madam," he agreed with a smile. As he turned to leave, she called after him. "Ethan, I'm glad you'll be staying in Enid for a while." He paused in the doorway, studying her face. "So am I, Olivia, so am I." The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable pattern. Ethan rode out to the Sanford ranch each morning and returned each evening to the boarding house. His days were filled with the demanding work of preparing for the cattle drive, mending fences, breaking horses, and moving herds to better grazing. His evenings, however, belonged to Olivia's boarding house, where he found himself lingering in the kitchen after the other guests had retired, helping with dishes and sharing stories of their past lives. He learned that Olivia had come west from St. Louis with her husband Robert, full of dreams for a new life on the frontier. She spoke of her brief happiness, the joy of her son's birth, and the devastating swiftness with which fever had claimed them both. In turn, Ethan shared more about his experiences in the war, his return to find his family gone, and his years of rootless wandering. "Why didn't you rebuild in Tennessee?" Olivia asked one evening as they sat on the back porch after the dishes were done. The spring air was cool but not uncomfortable, and the stars spread like diamond dust above them. Ethan contemplated his answer, swirling the last of his coffee in his cup. "Didn't see the point. Everything that made it home was gone. Figured I might as well keep moving until I found somewhere that felt right again." "And have you found somewhere that feels right?" He looked at her then, really looked at her in the soft light spilling from the kitchen window. "I'm starting to think maybe I have." Color rose in her cheeks, and she looked away. "The territory's growing. Lots of opportunities for a man with your skills. It's not just the opportunities I'm thinking about." He set his cup down on the porch railing. "Olivia," the back door opened suddenly and Emma Mitchell stepped out, her pregnant belly preceding her. "Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just looking for some air." "You're not interrupting anything," Olivia said quickly, rising from her chair. I was just about to check on the bread for tomorrow. Please, take my seat." Before Ethan could say anything further, she had disappeared into the house, leaving him with the schoolteacher's wife and the weight of unspoken words. Emma lowered herself carefully into the vacated chair. "She likes you, you know," she said without preamble. Ethan blinked in surprise. "Beg pardon, Olivia. She lights up when you come through that door every evening." Emma smiled knowingly. "I've been staying here since Samuel and I arrived, and I've never seen her sing until you came." "You've heard her?" Ethan asked, surprised. "Sometimes in the afternoon when she thinks everyone is out. Beautiful voice, but so sad. The songs are always sad." She placed a hand on her rounded belly. "Samuel says grief can trap a person if they don't find a way to let it go. I think you might be helping her find that way." Ethan wasn't sure how to respond to such frankness from a woman he barely knew. "Mrs. Mitchell, oh, don't mind me," she said with a wave of her hand. "Pregnancy makes me forward. Samuel is constantly apologizing for my lack of propriety these days. I just thought you should know that whatever you're feeling, you're not alone in it." She struggled to her feet. "And now I think I've had enough air. Good night, Mr. Quinn." "Good night, Mrs. Mitchell," he replied automatically, his mind still processing her words. After she left, Ethan remained on the porch, considering what to do next. Part of him wanted to follow Olivia inside and finish what he'd started to say. Another part, the cautious part that had kept him alive through war and the dangerous years that followed, warned him to proceed carefully. Olivia had rebuilt her life after tremendous loss. Who was he to disrupt it with feelings he wasn't even sure he could properly name? The decision was made for him when Olivia didn't return to the porch. After waiting a reasonable time, Ethan went inside to find the kitchen empty and the lamps turned down. Taking the hint, he made his way upstairs to his room, his thoughts in turmoil. The next morning at breakfast, Olivia was polite but distant, efficiently serving food without the warmth of recent days. Ethan felt the change like a physical chill, but didn't know how to bridge the sudden gap between them. He rode out to the Sanford ranch earlier than usual, throwing himself into work to avoid dwelling on the situation. Jacob Sanford found him around midday, repairing a broken corral fence with more force than the task required. "Whoa there, Quinn. That post ain't gonna fight back, you know." Ethan straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "Just making sure it's secure, Mr. Sanford." The older man leaned against the fence, studying him. "You've proven yourself a good worker these past weeks. Marshall speaks highly of your skills." "I appreciate that, sir." "Got something I want to discuss with you." Sanford pulled out a pouch of tobacco and began rolling a cigarette with practiced movements. "After this drive to Kansas, I'm thinking of expanding operations. Bought another 500 acres to the north last month. Need someone I can trust to oversee that section. It would mean a permanent position, better pay, and the use of a cabin on the property." The offer caught Ethan by surprise. "That's generous, Mr. Sanford." "Ain't generosity. It's good business. Men like you are hard to find out here, reliable, skilled, and not looking to move on at the first whisper of gold or adventure elsewhere." He lit his cigarette and took a deep draw. "Course, a man in such a position should think about settling down proper. Hard to run a piece of land that size alone." Ethan caught the implication and cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I'll need to think on it, sir." Sanford nodded, unsurprised. "Take your time. Offer stands until we get back from Kansas." He pushed away from the fence. "Oh, and Quinn. Whatever's got you trying to murder that fence post might want to sort it out before the drive. Can't have a distracted man watching my cattle." As the rancher walked away, Ethan considered his advice. Perhaps it was time to sort things out with Olivia one way or another. The possibility of a permanent position changed things. For the first time since the war, he could see a future beyond the next job, the next town. The question was whether Olivia might want to be part of that future. He rode back to Enid earlier than usual that evening, determined to speak with her privately. The boarding house was quiet when he arrived, most guests still out about their business in town. He found Olivia in the garden behind the house, picking herbs for the evening meal. She looked up at his approach, surprise evident on her face. "You're back early. Is everything all right at the ranch?" "Everything's fine," he assured her, removing his hat. "I just needed to speak with you before the others return." Wariness entered her expression. "What about?" "Last night, before Mrs. Mitchell interrupted, I was about to say something important." He took a deep breath. "Olivia, these weeks getting to know you have meant more to me than I can properly express. I know we've both carried grief for a long time, and maybe that's what drew us to each other initially, that recognition. But it's become more than that, at least for me." Her hands stilled on the herbs she was gathering, but her eyes remained fixed on the plants. "Ethan, I don't think, please let me finish." He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "Today, Sanford offered me a permanent position after the cattle drive, overseeing a new section of his property, with my own cabin and good wages. For the first time in years, I'm considering putting down roots." Now she looked up, her expression a complex mixture of emotions he couldn't fully decipher. "That's wonderful news. You deserve stability. The thing is, Olivia, I can't imagine building that life without you in it." He met her gaze steadily. "I'm not asking for any promises right now. I know this is sudden and we both have histories that make us cautious. All I'm asking is that you consider the possibility of us together once I return from the drive." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Ethan." She set down her basket and moved past him toward the house. "I can't have this conversation right now." He caught her arm gently. "Olivia, please, if you don't feel the same way, just tell me and I'll never mention it again." "It's not that." She wouldn't meet his eyes. "It's complicated." "Then help me understand." She sighed deeply, then motioned toward the small bench beneath the apple tree at the garden's edge. "Sit with me." They settled on the bench, a careful distance between them. Olivia folded her hands in her lap, staring at them as she gathered her thoughts. "When Robert and James died, something in me died with them," she finally said. "For months, I could barely function. The only thing that kept me going was finishing this boarding house, completing what Robert had started. It gave me purpose when I had none." Ethan nodded, understanding all too well how the need for purpose could sustain a person through unbearable grief. "The lullaby you heard me singing, I used to sing it to James every night," she continued. "After he died, I couldn't bear to sing it anymore. It hurt too much. But on the anniversary of his death, I made myself sing it again. It was my way of, I don't know, keeping him with me somehow. And that's when I overheard you," Ethan said softly. "Yes." She glanced at him. "I was embarrassed at first that a stranger had witnessed such a private moment. But then you were so kind, so understanding, and as I got to know you, I found myself looking forward to our conversations, to having you around." A single tear escaped, which she quickly wiped away. "It scared me." "Why?" he asked, though he suspected he knew. "Because feeling anything again, happiness, hope, attraction, feels like a betrayal of what I lost. And because I'm terrified of losing someone else I care for." She finally met his gaze fully. "I do care for you, Ethan, more than I thought possible, but the cattle drive." Understanding dawned. "You're afraid I won't come back," she nodded. "It's dangerous work and the drive takes weeks. Anything could happen." "Olivia." He took her hand carefully in his. "I can't promise nothing will happen. Life doesn't offer those guarantees, we both know that better than most. But I can promise you this, I have every intention of returning to Enid, to you." She looked down at their joined hands. I've spent 3 years protecting myself from more pain. Opening my heart again won't be easy. I don't expect it to be, he assured her. All I'm asking is for a chance for both of us to see if what we've started here might grow into something worth the risk. Olivia was silent for a long moment, and Ethan held his breath, waiting for her answer. Finally, she squeezed his hand. When do you leave for the drive? 3 days from now. We expect to be gone about 6 weeks if the weather holds. She nodded, seeming to come to a decision. Then we have 3 days to get to know each other better and 6 weeks for me to consider all you've said. A small, tentative smile curved her lips. And when you return, we'll see where we stand. Relief and joy flooded through him. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was an opening, a willingness to try that he hadn't dared hope for. That seems more than fair. Good. She stood, retrieving her basket of herbs. Now, I have supper to prepare and you should tend to your horse. The other guests will be returning soon. Ethan rose as well, settling his hat back on his head. Yes, madam. As he walked toward the stable, his step was lighter than it had been in years. The past couldn't be changed, but perhaps the future held more promise than either of them had allowed themselves to believe. The next 3 days passed in a blend of work and stolen moments with Olivia. Though they maintained propriety in front of the other guests, there was a new understanding between them, shared smiles across the dinner table, lingering conversations on the porch after others had retired, and once, daringly, a walk through town on Sunday afternoon that had tongues wagging among Enid's more gossipy residents. On their walk, Ethan learned more about the town and its inhabitants through Olivia's eyes. She pointed out the general store where the owner routinely overcharged newcomers, the church where the preacher delivered sermons of fire and brimstone to a mostly empty building, and the small plot of land at the edge of town that she had purchased as an investment. What will you do with it? Ethan asked, curious about this sign of her forward thinking. I'm not entirely sure yet, she admitted. Robert always said Enid would grow once the railroad came through, and he was right. It might be worth more in a few years, or I might build something new if the boarding house becomes too much to manage alone. The mention of alone hung between them, pregnant with possibility, but neither acknowledged it directly. On the evening before his departure, after the other guests had gone to bed, Ethan and Olivia sat together on the back porch swing. The spring night was mild, with a quarter moon providing just enough light to see by. They had been quiet for some time, simply enjoying each other's company when Olivia broke the silence. Would you like to hear the lullaby, properly this time, not through a window? The request surprised him. I'd be honored. She took a deep breath and began to sing, her voice clear and sweet in the night air. The melody was simple, the words about angels watching over sleep and dreams of peaceful places. But the emotion behind them was complex: love and loss, memory and hope, all woven together in the gentle rise and fall of her voice. When she finished, Ethan found himself fighting back unexpected tears. That was beautiful, he said hoarsely. It feels different, singing it for someone instead of to an empty room, she admitted. Less like grieving and more like sharing something precious. Thank you for sharing it with me. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to give you something before I leave tomorrow, something to keep until I return. From his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden carving of a horse. It was exquisitely detailed despite its small size, clearly the work of someone with both skill and patience. I made this during the war, he explained, placing it in her palm. Carved it from a piece of oak while waiting for orders. It's one of the few things I've kept with me through all my wanderings. I'd like you to hold on to it for me. Olivia's fingers closed around the carving. "Ethan, I can't take this. It's too personal, too valuable to you." "That's why I want you to have it," he said simply. "Something of mine to keep with you until I come back." She studied his face in the dim light, then nodded. "I'll keep it safe for you." They sat in companionable silence a while longer before the lateness of the hour forced them to say good night. At the bottom of the stairs that led to their separate rooms, Ethan paused, gathering his courage. "Olivia, may I?" He gestured vaguely, unsure how to ask for what he wanted. Understanding softened her features. She stepped closer and tilted her face up to his. "Yes." The kiss was gentle, tentative at first, then deepening as they leaned into each other. Ethan's hand came up to cup her cheek, and he felt her fingers curl into the front of his shirt. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing unevenly. "I should go," he murmured, though every fiber of his being wanted to stay. "Yes," she agreed, just as reluctantly. "Early start tomorrow. Good night, Olivia." He brushed his thumb across her cheek. "Dream well." "Good night, Ethan." "Be safe." He ascended the stairs, feeling her eyes on his back until he reached the landing. In his room, Ethan packed the last of his belongings for the long journey ahead, his mind filled with thoughts of Olivia and the promise of what might await him upon his return. The cattle drive began at dawn the following day. 500 head of prime beef cattle stretching across the plains, driven by 15 men, including Ethan. He had said a brief farewell to Olivia at breakfast, mindful of the other guests, but the memory of their kiss the night before sustained him as the boarding house disappeared from view. The journey to the railhead in Kansas would be arduous, as all cattle drives were. Dust, heat, storms, river crossings, the constant threat of stampedes all were part of the job. But Ethan approached each challenge with a new determination. For the first time in years, he had someone to return to. Back in Enid, Olivia found herself counting days from the moment Ethan rode away with the Sanford outfit. She kept his wooden horse on her nightstand, often running her fingers over its smooth contours before sleep. True to her word, she used the 6 weeks to consider what a future with Ethan might look like. She had loved Robert deeply and had imagined growing old with him in the house they were building together. His death, along with their sons, had shattered those dreams so completely that she had never expected to want such things again. The boarding house had become her life, a busy, structured existence that left little room for yearning. But Ethan had awakened something she thought long dead. His quiet strength, his understanding of her grief without trying to diminish it. His patience all had crept past her defenses when she wasn't looking. And now, with him gone, she found herself missing not just their conversations, but his presence itself, the way he filled a room without dominating it, the sound of his voice, the feeling of safety she experienced when he was near. As the weeks passed, Olivia began making subtle changes to her routine. She sang more often, not just the lullaby but other songs she had enjoyed before loss had silenced her. She spent time on the plot of land she owned at the edge of town, walking its boundaries and imagining what might be built there. And she began setting aside a portion of her earnings each week, thinking of the future in a way she hadn't allowed herself to do for years. 4 weeks into the cattle drive, trouble struck. A sudden thunderstorm spooked the herd, causing a nighttime stampede that scattered cattle across miles of prairie. In the chaos, Ethan's horse stepped in a prairie dog hole and went down hard, throwing him. The fall knocked him unconscious, and by the time he came to, the herd and the other drovers were long gone. His horse had broken a leg and had to be put down, a mercy that tore at Ethan's heart as he pulled his pistol. Left afoot with limited supplies, miles from the nearest settlement, he faced a grim situation. His canteen was half full. He had some jerky in his saddlebags, and his rifle was still in its scabbard. But without a horse, catching up to the drive would be impossible. Gathering what he could carry, Ethan set out walking, following the trampled earth left by the stampede. He knew Jacob Sanford would have men looking for missing drovers once the herd was under control, but he couldn't afford to wait in place. Water was too precious out here, and the summer sun too merciless. For 3 days he walked, rationing his water carefully and keeping to creek beds where possible. On the 4th day, his canteen empty and his strength failing, he spotted a small homestead in the distance. Hope renewed his energy as he made his way toward it. The family who lived there, a German immigrant named Mueller, his wife, and 3 children, took Ethan in without question, sharing their modest food and allowing him to recover his strength. They had no horse to spare, but offered to let him stay until the monthly supply wagon came through in a few days. "You can ride with him to Dodge City," Mueller explained in his heavily accented English. "From there, maybe find work or way home." Ethan thanked them for their kindness, knowing he had little choice but to accept. His thoughts turned constantly to Olivia, wondering if she would think he had abandoned her when he didn't return with the Sanford outfit. Meanwhile, in Enid, word reached Olivia of the stampede through a telegraph message sent to Jacob Sanford's wife. The news was sparse: the herd mostly recovered, 2 men injured, 1 missing, presumed dead. No names were provided. Olivia found herself at the Sanford ranch the same afternoon, her heart in her throat as she asked for details. Mrs. Sanford, a practical woman with silver hair and kind eyes, invited her in for tea. "All I know is what the telegram said, Miss Lawson. Jacob will send more information when he can." "But surely they mentioned who was missing," Olivia pressed, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The older woman's expression softened with understanding. "You're sweet on one of those boys, aren't you?" "Which one?" "Ethan Quinn," Olivia admitted, seeing no point in denying it. "He's been boarding with me these past weeks," Mrs. Sanford nodded. "Quinn? Good worker," Jacob said. "Steady man." She patted Olivia's hand. "Don't lose hope yet. Those cattle drives are chaotic at the best of times. Could be he just got separated and will turn up." But as days passed with no further news, Olivia found her hope waning. She continued the motions of running her boarding house, but guests noticed her distraction, the shadows under her eyes, the way she would pause sometimes in the middle of a task, staring at nothing. Emma Mitchell, now in her 8th month of pregnancy, found her one afternoon in the garden, silently weeding with tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Olivia," she said, lowering herself awkwardly onto a nearby bench. "Come sit with me." Olivia complied, too weary to refuse the comfort offered. "I'm being foolish," she said, wiping her cheeks. "Getting this upset over a man I've known such a short time." "Time doesn't always measure the depth of feeling," Emma replied. "Samuel proposed to me after knowing me just 3 weeks, and here we are." She placed Olivia's hand on her rounded belly where the baby kicked energetically. "Sometimes the heart knows what it wants right away." "I never expected to feel this way again," Olivia confessed. "After Robert and James died, I thought that part of me was finished. And now—" She couldn't continue. "Now you're afraid you've lost someone else you love," Emma finished for her. "But you don't know that for certain. Men like Ethan Quinn are survivors." Olivia nodded, trying to take comfort in her friend's words. That night, alone in her room, she held the wooden horse close to her heart and sang the lullaby, as if the melody might somehow reach across the miles to wherever Ethan was. Ethan did eventually reach Dodge City, catching a ride with the supply wagon as Mueller had suggested. From there, he managed to secure work as a guard on a southbound freight wagon, slowly making his way back toward Oklahoma Territory. The journey was slow, hampered by bad roads and frequent stops, but it brought him steadily closer to Enid and to Olivia. Nearly 3 weeks after the stampede, 8 weeks after leaving Enid, Ethan finally saw the town on the horizon. His clothes were ragged, his face bearded, and exhaustion weighed heavily on his shoulders, but the sight filled him with renewed energy. He thanked the wagon master for the job and ride, collected his meager pay, and set out on foot for the boarding house. The town had grown even in the short time he'd been away, with new construction visible at its edges. Ethan attracted curious looks as he made his way down the main street, his trail-worn appearance standing out among the townspeople. He paid them no mind, focused only on reaching Olivia. At the boarding house, he paused at the front gate, suddenly uncertain. What if she had given up on him? What if she had decided that loving again wasn't worth the risk after all? Before he could work up the courage to approach the door, it swung open, and there she was, Olivia, frozen on the threshold, staring at him as if seeing a ghost. "Ethan," her voice was barely audible. "It's me," he confirmed, taking a hesitant step forward. "I'm sorry I'm late." For a moment she didn't move. Then, with a cry that was half sob, half laugh, she flew down the steps and across the yard, throwing herself into his arms with such force that he staggered backward. "You're alive," she whispered against his neck, her arms tight around him. "You're alive." Ethan held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the warmth of her against him. "I promised I'd come back to you." She pulled back just enough to look at his face, her hands coming up to touch his bearded cheeks, his brow, the line of his jaw, as if confirming he was real. "They said someone was missing, presumed dead. I feared." "It takes more than a stampede to keep me from my promises," he said, managing a tired smile. "Though I lost my horse and had to make my way back the hard way." Olivia suddenly seemed to notice his bedraggled state. "You must be exhausted. Come inside, you need food and rest." She took his hand, leading him toward the house, then paused to look back at him. "Ethan, about what we discussed before you left." His heart stilled, preparing for rejection. "Yes. I've had plenty of time to think," she said, her eyes steady on his. "And I've decided that some risks are worth taking." She squeezed his hand. "If your offer still stands, I'd like to see where this might lead you and me together." Relief and joy washed over him. "My offer definitely still stands." A smile bloomed on her face, the first full, unclouded smile he'd seen from her. Then, "Welcome home, Ethan Quinn. Welcome home." In the weeks that followed, Ethan recovered his strength while helping Olivia with the boarding house. Jacob Sanford, upon hearing of his return, honored the job offer despite Ethan's failure to complete the cattle drive, understanding that the circumstances had been beyond his control. "Cabin's almost ready," he told Ethan during a visit to town. "You can move in next month if you're still interested." Ethan glanced at Olivia, who stood beside him on the boardwalk. "I am, but I may need a slight amendment to our arrangement." Sanford's weathered face creased in a knowing smile as he looked between them. "I reckon that cabin's big enough for 2 if that's what you're getting at." Olivia blushed, but didn't contradict him. Later that evening, as they sat together on the porch swing, Ethan broached the subject that had been on his mind. "I know it's soon," he began, taking her hand in his. "But life out here is uncertain, and I've already lost too much time to wasted years. Olivia Lawson, would you consider becoming my wife? Not right away if you're not ready, but someday soon." She turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "Before I answer, there's something I need to show you." Taking his hand, she led him through the house and upstairs to a small room he had never entered, a room that had always been kept closed. Inside, illuminated by the soft glow of a lamp she lit, He saw a child's crib, a rocking chair, and shelves with toys carefully arranged. "James's room," she explained softly. "I couldn't bear to change it after he died. It's been exactly like this for 3 years." She moved to the crib, running her fingers along its wooden rail. "Every week, I dust everything. Every month, I wash the bedding, as if somehow if I keep everything perfect, it makes his absence less final." Ethan remained silent, understanding the importance of what she was sharing with him. "I know I need to let go," she continued. "Not of his memory, I'll never let go of that, but of this shrine I've created." She turned to face Ethan. "If I marry you, if we build a life together, I want to do it properly, not with one foot always in the past." He stepped toward her, taking her hands in his. "Whatever you need, time, help, understanding, it's yours. We don't have to change anything until you're ready." "That's just it," she said with quiet determination. "I am ready. I want to live again, Ethan. Fully live, with all the joy and fear and hope that entails." She squeezed his hands. "Yes, I will marry you. Not someday, but as soon as we can arrange it." The kiss they shared then was a promise of healing, of new beginnings, of a future neither had dared imagine until finding each other. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church, with Emma and Samuel Mitchell as witnesses. Jacob and Mrs. Sanford attended, along with Olivia's boarders and a few townspeople who had come to respect her over the years. Afterward, a small celebration was held at the boarding house, with food and music and more laughter than those walls had heard in a long time. That night, as husband and wife, Ethan and Olivia stood together in James's room. Slowly, carefully, they began the process of packing away the toys and baby clothes, preserving a few special items to keep and donating the rest to families in need. It was a solemn task, punctuated by tears but also by healing conversation as Olivia shared stories of her son's brief life. When they finished, the room was empty except for the crib, which Ethan promised to move to their new home. "Not to be forgotten," he assured her, "but to be ready for new possibilities when the time is right." A month later, they moved to the cabin on the Sanford property. It was small but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a cozy parlor, and a kitchen that Olivia immediately set about making her own. The boarding house was left in the capable hands of Emma Mitchell, who had given birth to a healthy boy, and was eager for work that would allow her to keep her child with her while her husband taught at the school. Ethan's work as overseer of the northern section kept him busy, but he always returned home to Olivia by sundown. Together, they planted a garden, added a porch to the cabin, and began building a life that honored their pasts while embracing their future. On warm evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching the sun set over the vast Oklahoma plains. Sometimes, Olivia would sing not just the lullaby now, but other songs as well, her voice growing stronger and more joyful with each passing day. Ethan would listen, marveling at how a chance encounter with a woman singing to ghosts had led him to find his heart's home at last. A year after their wedding, as autumn painted the plains in gold and amber, Olivia placed Ethan's hand on her slightly rounded belly. "It seems James's crib will be needed after all," she said, her eyes shining with a mixture of joy and nervous anticipation. Ethan's face lit up with wonder as he knelt before her, pressing a gentle kiss to where their child grew. "Are you happy?" he asked, looking up at her. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Scared too, but mostly happy." She ran her fingers through his hair. "This baby doesn't replace what we lost, but it's part of the new life we've built together. Our family," Ethan said, rising to take her in his arms. "Our family," she agreed, resting her head against his chest. That night, as they lay together in their bed, Ethan heard Olivia softly singing the lullaby not to memories or ghosts, but to the new life growing within her. He placed his hand over hers on her belly, and together they made a silent promise to this child and to each other, to love fiercely, to hold tight to joy even knowing its fragility, and to face whatever the future held, side by side. Spring arrived with gentle rains that turned the plains a vibrant green. Olivia's belly grew round with their child, and Ethan found himself marveling at the miracle of new life after so much loss. They prepared the second bedroom together, setting up the crib that had once held James, adding a rocking chair by the window, and hanging curtains Olivia had sewn from fabric in cheerful colors. "You think it will be a boy or a girl?" Ethan asked one evening as they sat on their porch, his hand resting protectively on her stomach. "I don't know," Olivia replied, smiling as the baby kicked against his palm. "As long as they're healthy, I don't mind either way." "I was thinking," Ethan said carefully, "if it's a boy, maybe we could name him Robert James after." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but her smile remained. "I'd like that. And if it's a girl, you choose," he offered. She thought for a moment. "Elizabeth, after my grandmother. She was the strongest woman I ever knew." "Robert James or Elizabeth," Ethan agreed, sealing the decision with a kiss. When Olivia's time came in late April, Ethan rode for the midwife in a panic, returning to find his wife already in established labor. The hours that followed were both terrifying and awe-inspiring as he witnessed Olivia's strength and determination. Shortly after midnight, their son was born, a robust baby with a shock of dark hair and his father's strong features. "Robert James Quinn," Olivia whispered, cradling him to her chest. "Welcome to the world, little one." Ethan sat beside them on the bed, overwhelmed by love for this tiny new person and for the remarkable woman who had brought him into being. "He's perfect," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're perfect." Olivia looked up at him, exhausted but radiant. "We did it, Ethan. We've made something beautiful together." As their son grew, so did the legacy they were building. Ethan's work on the Sanford Ranch prospered, and within 2 years he was able to purchase a parcel of land adjacent to their property, expanding their homestead. Olivia sold the boarding house to Emma Mitchell, using the proceeds to build a proper home for their growing family. Little Robert, or RJ, as they came to call him, was joined by a sister, Elizabeth, 2 years later. The children flourished in the open spaces of the Oklahoma Territory, growing strong and curious under the watchful eyes of parents who knew too well how precious life was. Olivia continued to sing the lullaby, but now it was part of a nightly ritual for children who drifted to sleep secure in their parents' love. Sometimes, when she thought Ethan wasn't listening, she would add a verse about angels watching over those already in heaven, her way of keeping James and her first husband in their family story. Ethan never mentioned hearing these additional verses, understanding that they were Olivia's private communion with her past. Instead, he would kiss each child goodnight, then wait for his wife in their bedroom, ready to hold her when memories weighed heavy, to laugh with her when joy bubbled over, to love her through all the moments in between. 5 years into their marriage, as they celebrated Christmas with their children and the friends who had become like family, the Mitchells, the Sanfords, and others from the growing community around them, Ethan pulled Olivia aside for a private moment. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Taking a chance on a dusty cowboy who eavesdropped on your singing?" Olivia's laugh was warm and genuine. "Never, not for a single moment." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the laugh lines that had deepened with passing years of happiness. "That day you stopped to listen was the day I started living again." "For me too," he admitted. "I was just existing before I found you, found each other," she corrected, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. From the next room came the sound of children's laughter and the piano playing a Christmas carol. Their family, their home, their life together all had grown from that single moment of connection, when a woman sang a lullaby with no child present, and a cowboy didn't ask but simply listened. "Merry Christmas, my love," Ethan whispered against her hair. "Merry Christmas," Olivia replied. And many, many more. And there were many more years filled with growth and change, with challenges overcome together, with the inevitable sorrows that life brings, but also with abundant joy. Their children grew tall and strong, each finding their own path while carrying forward the legacy of love their parents had built. The frontier town of Enid grew too, becoming a proper city as Oklahoma moved toward statehood. Through it all, through every season of their lives together, Ethan and Olivia held fast to each other and to the knowledge that had guided them from the beginning, that even after the deepest grief, love could bloom again, as constant and renewing as the prairie grass that returned each spring to cover the plains in hope and possibility.